Have you ever watched your entire world fall apart right before your eyes? Have you ever felt so helpless that even breathing felt like a punishment? Today, I'm bringing you a story that will shake you to your core. A story about a small boy who had to grow up too fast. A story about a woman whose one simple act of kindness opened doors she never imagined existed. A story about love, pain, betrayal, and the kind of redemption that makes you believe in miracles again. Picture this. Early one morning, 4 expensive SUVs pull up in front of a small roadside food shop. The engines are still running, tinted windows. Security men step out first. Then a man in a designer suit steps down, and everything changes. Who is this man? What does he want? And how is a homeless 6-year-old boy connected to all of this wealth and power? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. A road. There was a forgotten corner of the city that most people drove past without looking twice. It was a place where hope seemed to have packed its bags and left long ago. In that corner, inside the skeleton of an unfinished building with exposed cement blocks and rusted iron rods sticking out like broken bones, a small boy lived with his mother. His name was David. He was only 6 years old, but if you looked into his eyes, you would see something that didn't belong in a child. You would see worry. You would see fear. You would see the kind of pain that forces a boy to become a man before he even understands what manhood means. Every single morning, long before the sun fully rose over the city, before the noise of Danfo buses and Okada riders filled the air, David would wake up on the cold, hard floor. He would sit up slowly, rub his eyes with his small fists, and then turn his head to look at his mother lying beside him. Her name was Grace. Grace was a woman who once had dreams. She once had a smile that could light up a room. She once had energy and plans and a future that looked bright. But now she lay on a thin, torn mat, her body too weak to stand, her face pale and tired, her breath slow and shallow. She was dying. David knew it. Even though no one told him directly, even though he was just a child, he knew. He could see it in the way her hands shook when she tried to drink water. He could see it in the way her eyes struggled to stay open. He could see it in the way she whispered his name, as if every word cost her something precious. David. She would whisper softly, her voice barely rising above the sound of the wind blowing through the empty window frames. Please, be careful today. Don't go too far. Come back early. And every single morning, David would crawl closer to her, take her weak hand in his small one, and squeeze it gently. I will, Mummy, he always said. I will come back, I promise. But even as he made that promise, even as he tried to smile for her, his heart was breaking inside. Because he knew that the moment he stepped out of that building, he would have to face the world alone. A world that didn't care about a 6-year-old boy with torn clothes and dusty feet. A world that looked at him like he was invisible. A world that had already decided he didn't matter. Still, David would stand up, dust off his shorts, and whisper to himself the same words he whispered every single day. I must find food today. Mummy needs to eat. I cannot come home empty-handed. And then, with his small heart pounding, in his thin chest, he would step out into the burning heat of Port Harcourt, hoping that today, just maybe today, someone would show him a little kindness. But let me take you back. Let me tell you how Grace and David ended up in that unfinished building. Let me tell you how a woman who once had everything lost it all in the cruelest way possible. Grace had not always been helpless. Years ago, before David was even born, Grace was a young woman full of life and ambition. She had just graduated from Rivers State University with a degree in business administration. She was proud of herself. Her parents were proud of her. She had big dreams. She wanted to build something. She wanted to make a name for herself. So with the little money she saved from family support and small jobs, she opened a provisions shop in a busy part of Port Harcourt near Rumuokwuta. It wasn't a big shop, it wasn't fancy. But it was hers. She sold rice, beans, gari, groundnut oil, Milo, peak milk, bread, soft drinks, biscuits, and all the small things people needed every day. Her customers liked her. She was polite, she was honest. She smiled at everyone, and she always gave a little extra when she could. Slowly, her shop began to grow. Money was coming in. Life was getting better. Grace felt like she was finally on the right path. And then she met him. His name was Samuel. Samuel was a brilliant man, tall, soft-spoken, respectful, and full of dreams that matched hers. They met at a friend's birthday party in Guro Phase 2. They talked for hours that night. He told her about his plans to study abroad, to get a master's degree in software engineering, to build something big, something that would change lives. Grace believed in him. She believed in him so deeply that when he told her he got a scholarship to study in the United Kingdom, but didn't have money to process his international passport, pay for his visa appointment, or buy his ticket, she didn't hesitate. She emptied her savings. She sold some of her shop inventory at a loss. She borrowed money from her cousin. She did everything she could to make sure Samuel could travel. Grace, Samuel said to her the night before he left, holding both her hands tightly, "I will never forget this. You are sacrificing so much for me. When I finish my program and start working, I will send for you. I will marry you properly. I will take care of you forever. I swear it." Grace smiled, tears in her eyes. "I believe you, Samuel. Go and make us proud. I will be here waiting." And so Samuel traveled. For the first 2 weeks, everything was perfect. He called her every single day. He sent her photos of London. He told her about his classes, his new friends, the cold weather, the beautiful buildings. Grace would laugh on the phone, her heart full of joy and hope. But then something changed. On the 15th day, his call didn't come. Grace waited. She told herself maybe he was busy. Maybe his phone battery died. Maybe he had a lot of schoolwork. But the next day, still no call. And the day after that, nothing. Grace started calling him, over and over. She called in the morning. She called at night. She sent text messages. "Samuel, are you okay? Please call me back. I'm worried. Samuel, please." But there was no response. His number stopped going through. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Grace couldn't eat. She couldn't sleep. She cried every night, staring at her phone, praying for it to ring. Weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2 months. And then Grace discovered something that shattered her completely. She was pregnant. She sat in the small clinic near Eliozu, staring at the doctor who had just given her the news. Her hands were shaking, her mind was spinning. "Pregnant," she whispered. "Are you sure, doctor?" "Yes, Ma," the doctor replied gently. "You are almost 8 weeks along." Grace covered her mouth with both hands. Tears poured down her face. How will I do this alone? How will I take care of a child when the father is gone? When I don't even know if he's alive or dead?" The doctor didn't have an answer. Grace walked out of that clinic in a daze. She didn't know what to do. She didn't know where to turn. But as the days passed and her stomach began to grow, she made a decision. She would keep the baby. She would fight. She would survive. And 9 months later, in a small hospital in Port Harcourt, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She looked into his tiny face, and through all her pain, she smiled. "David," she whispered. "Your name is David." David grew up fast. He was a curious child, always asking questions, always wanting to learn. When he turned 3, Grace enrolled him in a small nursery school near their house in Rumuokwuta. She worked hard every day in her shop to pay his school fees, to buy him clothes, to feed him, to give him the childhood she never had. They were not rich, but they were surviving, and they were happy. But then, when David turned 4 years old, something terrible began to happen to Grace. She started feeling weak. At first, she ignored it. She thought it was just stress from working too much, but the weakness didn't go away. It got worse. Her legs began to swell, her face looked puffy, her body felt heavy. Some mornings, she could barely get out of bed. One afternoon, while she was arranging goods in her shop, her vision suddenly became blurry. She tried to hold onto the table to steady herself, but her legs gave way. She collapsed. Her neighbors rushed her to the hospital. After several tests, the doctor called her into his office. His face was serious. Grace knew immediately that something was very wrong. "Madam Grace," the doctor said slowly, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but you have chronic kidney failure." Grace felt the ground disappear beneath her. "Kidney failure?" she repeated, her voice shaking. What does that mean?" The doctor sighed. "It means your kidneys are no longer working properly. You will need dialysis treatment at least twice a week to survive." And eventually you will need a kidney transplant. How much will all of this cost? Grace asked, her heart pounding. The doctor looked at her with pity. Dialysis alone costs between 60 and 80,000 naira per session. And a kidney transplant? You will need to travel abroad for that. It could cost millions. Grace's world collapsed. She tried. God knows she tried. She used every single naira she had saved. She sold her television. She sold her fridge. She sold her jewelry. She borrowed money from friends. She begged family members. But dialysis was too expensive. Within 1 year, her savings were completely gone. She couldn't pay her rent anymore. She couldn't pay David's school fees. She couldn't even feed them properly. One terrible morning, the landlord banged on her door and told her to leave. If you cannot pay, then pack your things and go, he said coldly. Grace cried as she packed their few belongings into 2 bags. She held David's hand, and together they walked out of the house they once called home. They had nowhere to go. For 3 days they slept under the Ikwere Road flyover. Grace was too weak to walk far. David stayed close to her, scared and confused. Then one evening, an old woman who sold oranges by the roadside saw them and felt pity. There is an unfinished building near Agre Road, the woman said. Nobody stays there. You can go and manage inside. At least you will have a roof over your head. Grace thanked the woman with tears in her eyes. That night, Grace and David moved into the unfinished building. Grace cleaned one corner as best as she could, spread an old mat on the floor, and that became their new home. David stopped going to school. There was no money for fees. There was barely money for food. Grace's health got worse and worse. Some days she couldn't even sit up, and that is how David, at just 6 years old, was forced to become the provider. Every single day, he walked the streets of Port Harcourt, begging strangers for food, for money, for anything that could keep him and his mother alive. And now, let me bring you back to that morning. David was walking slowly along a busy road near Mile 1. Cars honked loudly. Motorcycles zoomed past him, kicking dust into his face. People rushed by without even looking at him. He walked up to a woman standing outside a shop. "Auntie, please," David said softly, his voice barely audible over the noise. "Help me with small money. My mummy is sick." The woman glanced at him, wrinkled her nose in disgust, and waved him away. "Go from here, I beg. I no get anything for you." David swallowed hard and moved to the next person, a man in a suit. "Sir, please, I'm hungry. Just small help." The man didn't even stop walking. He brushed past David as if he was air. David tried again, and again, and again. Some people ignored him completely. Some shouted at him. Some looked at him with pity, but still walked away. Each rejection felt like a stone pressing down on his small chest. His feet hurt, his throat was dry, his stomach was empty. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't go home without something. He whispered to himself, his voice shaking, "Mummy must eat. I must find something. Anything." He wiped his eyes quickly with the back of his hand and kept walking. After what felt like hours, David's legs were trembling with exhaustion. He looked around desperately, his vision blurring from hunger. And then he saw it. A small roadside food shop. It wasn't big, it wasn't fancy, but smoke was rising from a pot outside, and the smell of jollof rice and fried plantain filled the air. David's stomach growled so loudly he pressed his hand against it, embarrassed. He walked closer, slowly, like a wounded animal approaching something it wasn't sure about. Beside the shop there was a small wooden bench. David sat down, carefully, his body sinking into the seat with relief. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask for anything. He just sat there, his small hands resting on his knees, his eyes watching people pass by, hoping, praying that someone, anyone, would notice him. But David didn't know that at that exact moment, his life was about to change forever. Inside the small food shop, a young woman was working quickly, her hands moving from one task to another. Her name was Joy. Joy was 25 years old, but life had aged her faster than it should have. She owned this small shop, a modest place she had built with her own sweat and tears after dropping out of university due to lack of funds. This shop was everything to her. It was her survival. It was her hope. It was the only thing standing between her and complete failure. Every day she woke up at 4 a.m. to prepare food. She cooked rice, beans, yam, plantain, stew, and soup. She served her customers with a smile even when her body ached with exhaustion. She washed plates until her hands were sore. She swept and cleaned until the small shop looked decent. And every night she counted the little money she made, praying it would be enough to pay her rent, save for school fees, and maybe, just maybe, give her a better future. But today something unusual happened. Joy was washing plates outside when she noticed a small figure sitting on the bench beside her shop. She paused, her hands still in the soapy water, and looked more closely. It was a little boy. He looked so small, so thin, so lost. His clothes were torn and faded, his feet were dusty and bare, but it was his face that stopped Joy completely. His eyes looked tired, yes, but there was something else there too. Something deeper. Something that made her heart squeeze in pain. Joy dried her hands on her wrapper and walked toward him slowly. "Hello," she said gently, bending down a little so she could see his face properly. The boy looked up at her, startled. "What's your name?" Joy asked with a warm smile. The boy hesitated, then said quietly, "David." "David," Joy repeated softly. "That's a nice name." "My name is Joy. Why are you sitting here alone, David? Are you waiting for someone?" David looked down at his small hands. He didn't answer immediately. Then, in a voice so quiet Joy had to lean closer to hear, he said, "I'm hungry, Auntie." Those 3 words hit Joy like a physical blow. She stared at the boy, and in that moment she saw something in him that reminded her of herself. She remembered the days when she couldn't afford to eat. She remembered the pain of hunger, the shame of begging, the helplessness of being invisible. Without saying another word, Joy stood up quickly and walked into her shop. Her heart was pounding. She grabbed a plate and scooped a generous portion of jollof rice, adding fried plantain and a piece of meat. She carried it outside and placed it in front of David. "Here," she said gently, "eat." David's eyes widened. He stared at the food, then at Joy, then back at the food. "Thank you, Auntie," he whispered, his voice cracking. But then, instead of eating, David did something that confused Joy completely. He looked up at her and asked, "Auntie, please, do you have takeaway pack?" Joy blinked. "Takeaway? Why? Don't you want to eat now?" David shook his head slowly. "I want to carry it home, Auntie. My mummy needs to eat too." Joy felt her breath catch in her throat. She stared at the small boy in front of her. And suddenly, tears filled her eyes. This child wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about his mother. She quickly wiped her face and nodded. "Okay, David, wait here." She went inside, packed the food carefully into 2 separate nylon bags, and brought them back. "Here," she said, "one for you, one for your mummy." David's face lit up with a smile so pure, so genuine, that Joy almost started crying again. "Thank you, Auntie, thank you so much." And before Joy could say anything else, David grabbed the bags tightly and ran off, his small legs moving as fast as they could. Joy stood there, watching him disappear into the crowd. Her heart felt heavy. Who was this boy? Where was he going? What kind of life was he living? She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. David ran through the streets of Port Harcourt, his small feet pounding against the hot pavement. He didn't stop. He didn't slow down. He clutched the food bags tightly to his chest, terrified that someone might try to snatch them away. When he finally reached the unfinished building, he slipped inside quickly and closed the wooden board they used as a door. His chest was heaving with exhaustion, but his face was filled with joy. "Mummy," he called out. "Mummy, I'm back." Grace was lying on the mat in the corner, her eyes half closed. She could barely lift her head. "David?" she whispered weakly. David rushed over to her, kneeling beside her. "Mummy, I brought food. Look." He held up the bags excitedly. Grace tried to smile, but she was too weak. David quickly grabbed a plastic plate from the corner and washed it with the little water they had saved in a small bucket. His hands were shaking with urgency. He scooped some rice onto the plate, added the plantain and meat, and carefully carried it to his mother. "Mummy, please eat," he said softly, holding the plate close to her. Grace looked at him with tears in her eyes. She wanted to feed herself, but her hands were too weak to hold the spoon. David saw this and immediately understood. He picked up the spoon himself and began feeding her, one small spoonful at a time. "Chew slowly, Mummy," he said gently, just like she used to say to him when he was younger. Grace chewed slowly, tears streaming down her face. This was her baby, her 6-year-old son, and he was taking care of her like a grown man. "Thank you, my son," she whispered between bites. When she had eaten enough, David gave her water, tilting the cup carefully to her lips so she wouldn't spill. Then he took a small cloth and gently wiped her mouth. Only after he was sure his mother was okay did David finally open his own pack of food. But he didn't sit beside her. He went to the far corner of the room and sat on the bare floor, eating slowly, his eyes distant. He missed school. He missed his friends. He missed learning new things. He missed playing. He missed being a child. But those days were gone. Later that evening, when Grace felt a little stronger, she turned her head toward David. "David," she said softly, "where did you get this food?" David crawled closer to her and sat down. "Mummy, I was walking by the road and I saw a small food shop. I was so tired, so I sat down on the bench outside. Then a woman came out. Her name is Auntie Joy. She asked me my name and I told her. Then she asked why I was sitting there and I said I was hungry." Grace's eyes filled with tears again. "What happened next?" "She went inside and brought food for me," David continued, his voice full of gratitude. "But Mummy, I told her I wanted to carry it home for you, so she packed it into bags for me." Grace closed her eyes, fresh tears rolling down her cheeks. "God bless her," she whispered. "God bless that woman. May she never suffer. May she never lack. May God lift her up higher than she can imagine." David hugged his mother gently. "Don't cry, Mummy, please." Grace held him close, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. "I love you, David. I love you so much." "I love you too, Mummy." And together they fell asleep on that thin mat, in that cold, dark room, holding on to each other like they were the only thing left in the world that mattered. Meanwhile, across the city, in a small one-room apartment near Eliozu, Joy sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The day had been long and exhausting, but her mind wasn't on her tired body. Her mind was on that little boy. David. She couldn't stop thinking about him. Those sad eyes, that thin body, that quiet voice, and most of all, the way he refused to eat until he could take food home to his mother. Joy hugged her pillow tightly and whispered into the darkness. "What kind of life is that child living? Where is his father? Why is his mother so sick? God, please help them." She didn't know it yet, but God was already setting things in motion. The next morning, David woke up early again. The sun was barely rising, but he was already on his feet. He whispered goodbye to his mother and stepped out into the streets once more, his small heart filled with fear and hope. He spent hours begging, hours walking, hours being ignored, rejected, insulted. By midday, his body was weak with hunger. He hadn't eaten anything since last night. And then, as if his legs were moving on their own, he found himself walking back toward Joy's food shop. He didn't plan it. He didn't even know if she would help him again. But something inside him said, "Go there. Maybe Auntie Joy will see you." When he reached the shop, he stood at a distance, pretending to just be walking by. He looked around nervously, trying not to seem desperate. Inside the shop, Joy was serving a customer when she happened to glance outside. And there he was. David. Her heart leapt. She quickly finished with the customer and rushed outside. "David," she called out. David turned and a small smile appeared on his tired face. "Good afternoon, Auntie Joy." Joy walked up to him, looking at him closely. He looked even thinner than yesterday. "David, where have you been? I didn't see you since yesterday." David looked down at his feet. "I was walking around, Auntie, trying to beg for food." Joy's heart clenched. "Did anyone help you?" David shook his head. "No, Auntie, most people just walk away." Joy knelt down so she was at his eye level. "David, listen to me carefully. From today, you don't need to walk around begging anymore. Do you hear me? Come to my shop every day, every single day. I will give you food for you and your mummy, okay?" David's eyes widened. "Every day, Auntie?" "Yes," Joy said firmly, "every day. I don't have much, but I will not let you and your mother go hungry. I promise you." David's lips trembled. "Thank you, Auntie," Thank you so much. Wait here, Joy said, standing up. She went inside and packed 2 portions of rice and stew into separate bags. When she came back outside, she handed them to David. But then she noticed something. His face looked pale. His body was swaying slightly. David, she said gently, have you eaten anything today? David shook his head. No, Auntie. Joy made a decision immediately. You are not going home like this. Sit down. But Auntie, no, Joy interrupted firmly. Sit down right now. David obeyed, sitting on the bench. Joy went back inside and brought out her own plate of food, the food she had cooked for herself. She placed it in front of him. Eat this now, you need strength. David stared at the food, then at Joy. But Auntie, this is your food. I will cook more for myself later, Joy said with a smile. You need it more than I do. Please eat. David picked up the spoon slowly and began to eat. Each bite felt like a gift from heaven. He chewed slowly, savoring every grain of rice, every piece of meat. And as he ate, Joy watched him with tears in her eyes. This child was suffering so much, and she couldn't understand why the world was so cruel to someone so innocent. From that day forward, David came to Joy's shop every single day. And every single day, Joy kept her promise. She gave him food. She talked to him. She treated him with kindness and respect. And slowly, something beautiful began to happen. David started smiling more. He started talking more. He started helping Joy in the shop. He would wash small plates, sweep the front, arrange chairs. Auntie Joy, let me help. You, he would say. You help me, so I want to help you too. And Joy would laugh, her heart warming. David, you are such a good boy. 3 weeks passed like this. David came every day. Joy fed him every day. They talked. They laughed. David told her stories about his life. Joy told him stories too, stories that made him forget his pain, even if just for a little while. One afternoon, as Joy packed food for David, she looked at him seriously. David, she said, I want to meet your mummy. Can I visit her? David's eyes widened. You want to come to my house, Auntie? Yes, Joy said with a warm smile. I want to see how she's doing. I want to meet her. Is that okay? David nodded quickly. Yes, Auntie. My mummy always talks about you. She says God sent you to us. Joy felt her eyes water. Tell your mummy I will come and see her soon, okay? Okay, Auntie. That evening, David ran home faster than usual. He burst into the unfinished building, his face glowing with excitement. Mummy, Mummy. Guess what? Grace looked up weakly. What is it, David? Auntie Joy said she wants to come and see you. She wants to visit us. Grace's eyes widened. Really? She said that? Yes, Mummy. She said she wants to know how you are doing. Tears filled Grace's eyes. David, tell her. Tell her she is welcome. Tell her I would be happy to meet her. 2 days later, Joy closed her shop early. She packed extra food into a bag, wore a simple dress, and waited for David to finish helping her clean. Are you ready? She asked him with a smile. Yes, Auntie. They walked together through the streets of Port Harcourt. Joy's heart was pounding. She didn't know what to expect. When they finally reached the unfinished building, Joy's breath caught in her throat. This was where they lived. In this. But she didn't say anything. She followed David inside quietly. The room was small and dark. There was barely any furniture, just a thin mat on the floor, a few plastic plates in the corner, and a woman lying down, looking so weak she could barely lift her head. Good evening, Ma, Joy said softly, stepping forward. Grace looked up at her and smiled weakly. You must be Joy, the woman my son talks about every single day. Joy knelt beside her, her eyes filling with tears. Yes, Ma. I brought some food for you. I hope it helps. Grace reached out and touched Joy's hand. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for taking care of my son. You don't know what you've done for us. You saved us. Joy squeezed her hand gently. You don't have to thank me, Ma. David is a wonderful boy, and I will keep helping him. You are not alone. And for the first time in a long time, Grace felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Over the next few weeks, Joy visited Grace regularly. She brought food. She brought medicine. She brought conversation. She brought light into their dark little room. Grace began to feel less lonely. Her sickness was still there, yes, but now she had someone who cared. someone who saw her as a person, not just a burden. David's life changed too. He smiled more, he laughed more, he felt like a child again, even if just for a few hours each day. But across the city, far from the unfinished building, far from Joy's small shop, far from David's innocent smile, something else was happening. Something that would shake all of their lives to the very core. Far away from Nigeria, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, a private jet cut through the clouds like a silver bird. Inside the jet, surrounded by luxury, a man sat quietly, staring out of the window. His name was Samuel. Samuel was no longer the struggling student who left Nigeria years ago with nothing but a dream and a borrowed suitcase. Now he was a billionaire. He was the co-founder of one of the biggest tech companies in the world, a software company whose products were used by millions of people across the globe. His net worth was in the billions. His name was mentioned in international business magazines. He had houses in 3 countries. He had cars that most people only saw in movies. But despite all of this wealth, despite all of this success, Samuel was not happy, because there was a hole in his heart, a hole shaped like a woman named Grace. Samuel held a glass of expensive wine in his hand, but he wasn't drinking it. He was just staring at it, lost in thought. His mind kept going back to Nigeria, back to Port Harcourt, back to a small provisions shop, back to a young woman with a bright smile and a generous heart. "Grace," he whispered softly, "I'm coming back for you." Samuel's story was complicated. When he first arrived in the UK years ago, everything was perfect. He and Grace talked every single day. He sent her pictures. He told her about his classes. He told her about his dreams. He told her he loved her and couldn't wait to bring her over to join him. But then disaster struck. One evening, Samuel was walking back to his dormitory after class when a group of men cornered him in a dark alley. They robbed him. They took his wallet, his laptop, his bag, and most importantly, his phone. Samuel tried to get his phone back. He tried to buy a new one immediately, but as an international student with limited funds, it took him almost 3 weeks to save enough money to replace it. And when he finally bought a new phone and tried to call Grace, her number wasn't going through. He tried again and again. He sent messages through social media, but her account seemed inactive. He sent emails, but they bounced back. He was terrified. He was desperate. He thought maybe she had changed her number. Maybe she was angry at him. Maybe she thought he abandoned her. Samuel tried everything he could think of. He even called some mutual friends in Nigeria, but most of them had also lost touch with Grace. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody had seen her. Months turned into a year turned into 2. Samuel threw himself into his studies and his work. He built his company with a friend he met at university. The company grew. It exploded. They made their first million within 3 years. Then their first 100 million. Then their first billion. Samuel became rich beyond his wildest dreams. But every night, when he lay in his expensive bed in his massive penthouse, he thought about Grace. He wondered if she was okay. He wondered if she had moved on. He wondered if she hated him. And he made a promise to himself. "One day, I will go back to Nigeria. I will find her. I will explain everything. I will make things right." And now, finally, after all these years, Samuel was on his way home. He had finished a major business deal in the United States, and instead of flying back to the UK, he decided to fly straight to Nigeria. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. He didn't announce it on social media. He just booked his private jet and left. As the plane began its descent toward Port Harcourt International Airport, Samuel's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and hope. "Grace," he whispered again, "please still be there. Please let me find you." When the plane landed, 3 black SUVs and 2 escort vehicles were already waiting on the tarmac. Samuel stepped out of the jet, wearing an expensive suit, designer sunglasses, and a gold wristwatch that cost more than most people's annual salary. Security men in black surrounded him immediately, forming a protective circle as they escorted him to the waiting cars. Samuel slid into the back seat of the lead SUV, and the convoy drove off toward a luxury hotel in the heart of Port Harcourt. But even as he sat in the soft leather seat, even as he looked out at the familiar streets of his hometown, his mind was somewhere else. Tomorrow, he said to himself. Tomorrow I start looking for her. And he had no idea how close he was to the answer, how close he was to a truth that would shatter him completely. Back at the unfinished building, David sat beside his mother, talking excitedly about his day. "Mummy, today Auntie Joy taught me how to count money properly. She said I'm very smart." Grace smiled weakly. "She's right, my son. You are very smart." David hugged her gently. "Mummy, one day when you get better, I will go back to school. And I will study hard, and I will become somebody big. And I will take care of you forever." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I know you will, David. I know you will." Neither of them knew that their lives were about to be turned upside down. Neither of them knew that the man responsible for their suffering was back in the country. And neither of them knew that a meeting was coming. A meeting that would change everything. The next morning, Samuel sat in his hotel suite, staring at a piece of paper in his hand. It was an old address. The last place he knew Grace lived before he traveled. He had written it down years ago and kept it in his wallet all this time. "This is where I'll start," he said to himself. He called his driver and his security team. "We're going out," he said. "I need to find someone." The convoy of SUVs drove through the streets of Port Harcourt, heading toward the address Samuel had written down. When they arrived, Samuel stepped out slowly, looking around. The compound looked older than he remembered, more worn down, but it was the right place. An elderly man was sitting outside, fanning himself with a newspaper. When he saw the expensive SUVs and the security men, his eyes widened in shock. "Who are these people?" he muttered. Samuel walked up to him slowly, removing his sunglasses. "Good morning, sir," he said respectfully. "My name is Samuel. I used to live here many years ago with a woman named Grace. Do you remember her?" The old man squinted at Samuel for a long moment, then his eyes widened even more. "Samuel," he said in shock, "is that you? The one who traveled abroad?" "Yes, sir," Samuel replied, his heart pounding. "Yes, that's me. Please, do you know where Grace is now?" The old man's face became sad. He shook his head slowly. "My son, Grace suffered. She suffered plenty." Samuel felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean? What happened to her?" The old man sighed deeply. "After you left, she found out she was pregnant. She had a baby boy. But then she became very sick. She couldn't work. She couldn't pay rent. She lost everything. One day she packed her things and left with the child. Nobody has seen her since." Samuel felt like the ground had been pulled from under his feet. "Pregnant?" he whispered. "She had my child?" "Yes," the old man said. "A boy." Samuel staggered backward, his hand going to his head. Oh God, what have I done?" His security men rushed to steady him. "Sir, are you okay?" Samuel wasn't okay. He felt like his chest was being crushed. Grace had been pregnant. She had his son, and he wasn't there. He wasn't there when she needed him most. He wasn't there when she was suffering. He wasn't there when she lost everything. "Find her," Samuel said suddenly, his voice sharp and desperate. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care how long it takes. Find her. Find my son." His team nodded. "Yes, sir." Samuel got back into his SUV, his mind spinning. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. He hired private investigators. He contacted NGOs that worked with homeless people. He reached out to hospitals. He did everything he could think of. But Port Harcourt was a big city. Finding one woman and one child in a city of millions was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Still, Samuel didn't give up. Every single day he went out searching. He drove through different neighborhoods. He asked people questions. He showed them old photos of Grace. But nobody had seen her. Nobody knew where she was. Days turned into a week turned into 2 weeks. Samuel was losing hope. He sat in his hotel room one night, staring at an old photo of Grace on his phone, tears streaming down his face. "Grace, where are you?" he whispered. "Please, God, help me find her." And then, as if the universe finally decided to show mercy, something happened. One of Samuel's security men, a man named Michael, was driving through the streets near Mile 1, conducting his own search. As he drove slowly, looking around, he happened to glance at a small roadside food shop. And sitting on a bench outside that shop was a little boy. Michael almost drove past. But something made him stop. Something about that boy looked familiar. Michael couldn't explain it. He had never met the boy before. But there was something about his face, something about his eyes, something that reminded him of someone. Michael parked the car and got out. He walked slowly toward the shop. As he got closer, he could see the boy more clearly. The boy was thin, his clothes were old, but his face looked intelligent, focused, determined. And then Michael saw something that made his heart stop. The boy's eyes. They were the same shape as Samuel's, the same deep, thoughtful look. Michael took out his phone and snapped a quick photo of the boy. Then he rushed back to his car and drove straight to Samuel's hotel. "Sir," Michael said breathlessly when he arrived, "Sir, I think I found something." Samuel looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" Michael showed him the photo. "This boy, sir. I saw him at a roadside food shop near mile 1. I can't explain it, but something about him reminded me of you." Samuel took the phone and stared at the photo. His hands began to shake. The boy in the photo was small, yes. He looked poor and neglected. But his eyes, those eyes looked just like Samuel's own eyes, and his face structure. It was almost identical to Samuel's childhood photos. "Oh my God," Samuel whispered, "this is my son. This is my son." He jumped to his feet. "Where is he? Where is this shop?" "Near mile 1, sir. I can take you there right now." "Let's go," Samuel said immediately. "Let's go now." The convoy of SUVs roared to life. Samuel sat in the back seat, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. His mind was racing. His son, he was about to meet his son. After all these years, after all this pain, he was finally going to see him. But he had no idea what he would say. He had no idea how to explain. He had no idea if Grace would even want to see him. Still, he had to try. He had to make this right. When they reached the area near mile 1, Michael slowed down, looking around carefully. "It was around here, sir. Let me find the exact spot." Samuel leaned forward, his eyes scanning every shop, every corner, every face. And then he saw it. A small roadside food shop. And sitting on a bench outside was a little boy. "Stop the car," Samuel said, his voice barely above a whisper. The SUV came to a halt. Samuel's hand was on the door handle, but he couldn't move. He just sat there, staring at the boy through the tinted window, his son. That was his son. And then the boy stood up and walked into the shop. Samuel's heart sank. "No, wait," he whispered. But then a young woman came out of the shop with the boy. She handed him something, a bag of food. She bent down and said something to him, smiling warmly. The boy smiled back, took the bag, and ran off. Samuel watched, his throat tight with emotion. Who was that woman? Why was she giving his son food? "Sir," Michael said quietly, "should we follow the boy?" "Yes," Samuel said immediately, "but don't get too close. I don't want to scare him." The SUV followed David from a distance as he ran through the streets. Samuel watched every step, his heart breaking more and more with each passing second. His son was running through these dirty streets. His son was living like this. His son was suffering. Finally, David slipped into an unfinished building. Samuel's heart stopped. "An unfinished building?" he whispered in horror. "He's living in an unfinished building." He couldn't take it anymore. He opened the car door and stepped out. His security men immediately surrounded him. "Sir, wait. I need to see them," Samuel said firmly. "I need to see my family." He walked toward the building slowly, his legs shaking. When he reached the entrance, he could hear voices inside, a child's voice and a woman's voice, a weak, tired woman's voice. But he recognized it immediately. Grace. Samuel's vision blurred with tears. He stepped inside the building and saw them. David was kneeling beside a woman lying on a thin mat, feeding her carefully with a spoon. The woman was so thin, so weak, she could barely move. "Grace," Samuel whispered, his voice breaking. Both David and Grace looked up, startled. Grace's eyes widened in shock. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at Samuel as if she was seeing a ghost. "Grace," Samuel said again, tears streaming down his face. "It's me. It's Samuel." Grace's body began to shake. "Samuel," she whispered, "is that really you?" Samuel fell to his knees, sobbing. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I lost my phone. I tried to find you. I tried so hard. I didn't know you were pregnant. I didn't know you were suffering. Please, please forgive me." David stood frozen, confused and scared. Who was this man? Why was his mother crying? Grace tried to sit up, but she was too weak. Samuel crawled closer, taking her hands in his. "Grace, please, let me make this right. Let me take care of you. Let me take care of our son, please." Grace looked into his eyes, tears pouring down her face. She saw the pain there. She saw the regret. She saw the love. And despite everything, despite all the years of suffering, despite all the pain, she felt something she thought she'd never feel again. Forgiveness. "Samuel," she whispered, "you came back." "I never stopped loving you," Samuel said, his voice shaking. "I never stopped thinking about you. And now that I've found you, I will never let you go again." He looked at David, who was still standing there, confused and frightened. Samuel opened his arms slowly. "David," he said gently, "I'm your father. I'm your daddy. And I'm here now. I'm here." David looked at his mother. Grace nodded, tears in her eyes. "Go to him, David. He's your father." David hesitated, then slowly walked toward Samuel, and when Samuel wrapped his arms around his son for the first time, when he held him close and felt his small body shaking with emotion, Samuel broke down completely. He sobbed into his son's shoulder, holding him tightly, as if he would never let go. "I'm sorry," Samuel kept saying. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. But I'm here now. And I will never leave you again. Never." Grace watched them, her heart full of so many emotions she couldn't even name them all. Pain, joy, relief, fear, hope. Samuel finally looked up at her, still holding David. "Grace, we're going to the hospital right now, today. You're going to get the best treatment money can buy. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix everything." Grace tried to speak, but she was too weak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Samuel called his security team. "Get an ambulance here immediately, the best one available, now." Within minutes, a private ambulance arrived. Medical personnel rushed in with a stretcher. They carefully lifted Grace onto it, handling her with the utmost care. David held his mother's hand the entire time, refusing to let go. Samuel stayed close, his eyes never leaving them. As they loaded Grace into the ambulance, Samuel turned to his security team. "Find that woman from the food shop, the one who was giving my son food. Find her and bring her to my hotel. I need to thank her." "Yes, sir." The ambulance sped through the streets of Port Harcourt, lights flashing, siren blaring. Inside, Grace lay on the stretcher, David sat beside, her holding her hand, and Samuel sat on the other side, his hand on her shoulder. "You're going to be okay," Samuel kept saying. "You're going to be okay." They arrived at the best private hospital in Port Harcourt. The top doctors were already waiting. They rushed Grace into the emergency wing. Tests were conducted, scans were done, consultations were held. Hours later, the lead doctor came out to speak with Samuel. "Mr. Samuel, your wife needs immediate dialysis and intensive care. Her condition is critical, but we can stabilize her. However, for a full recovery, she will need a kidney transplant, and that needs to be done abroad." "Then we go abroad," Samuel said without hesitation. "Tomorrow. Today. Right now, if possible. Money is not an issue. Just save her." The doctor nodded. "We'll start making arrangements immediately." Samuel sat in the waiting room, holding David close. David was quiet, his small mind trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. His entire world had been turned upside down. He had a father now. A father who came in expensive cars, a father who could afford hospitals, a father who could save his mother. "Daddy," David whispered, testing the word for the first time. Samuel looked down at him, fresh tears in his eyes. "Yes, son? Will Mummy be okay?" "Yes," Samuel said firmly. "She will be okay. I promise you." Meanwhile, back at the roadside food shop, Joy was closing up for the day when two security men in black suits approached her. She froze, her heart pounding with fear. Who were these men? What did they want? "Are you Joy?" one of them asked. Yes, she stammered. Why? Did I do something wrong? No, ma'am, the man said politely. Someone wants to meet you. Please come with us. Joy's mind raced. Who wanted to meet her? And why did they send security men? But something told her to trust them. Something told her this was connected to David. She locked her shop and followed them to a yucca black SUV. They drove her to a luxury hotel, the kind of hotel Joy had only seen in movies. She was escorted to a presidential suite on the top floor. And when the door opened, she saw David sitting on a large sofa. David, Joy exclaimed, rushing toward him. David jumped up and ran to her. Auntie Joy. They hugged tightly. Then Joy looked up and saw a man standing by the window, a tall, handsome man in an expensive suit. He turned to face her, and Joy saw tears in his eyes. You must be Joy, Samuel said softly, walking toward her. Thank you for saving my family. Joy was confused. Your family? I don't understand. Samuel sat down and explained everything. He told her who he was. He told her about Grace. He told her about David. He told her how he lost contact and spent years searching. And he told her how his security team found David at her food shop. If it wasn't for you, Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know if they would have survived long enough for me to find them. You gave them food. You gave them hope. You gave them life. Joy was crying now, overwhelmed by everything she was hearing. I just wanted to help. I couldn't watch that child suffer. Samuel reached into his jacket and pulled out a check. He handed it to Joy. When she looked at it, her eyes widened in shock. It was for 20 million naira. This is just the beginning, Samuel said. Tell me what you need. Do you want to go back to school? Do you want to expand your business? Do you want a better life? Tell me, and I will make it happen. Joy's hands were shaking. I can't accept this. It's too much. No, Samuel said firmly, it's not enough. You saved my family. You have no idea what that means to me. He stood up and placed his hands on her shoulders. Joy, you are a hero, and I will make sure you never struggle again. That's a promise. Over the next few weeks, everything changed rapidly. Grace was flown abroad to the United States for her kidney transplant. Samuel made sure she had the best surgeons, the best facilities, the best care money could buy. The operation was a success. Grace began to recover slowly, her strength returning day by day. David stayed with his father during this time, experiencing a life he had never imagined. He wore new clothes, he ate proper meals, he slept in a real bed. Samuel enrolled him in the best school in Port Harcourt, and David's teachers were amazed at how intelligent he was, despite missing so much school time. And Samuel made good on his promise to Joy. He paid for her to complete her university education at a top private university. He bought her a new, bigger shop in a better location. He gave her startup capital to expand her business, and he set up a trust fund for her future. But more than money, Samuel gave Joy something else, a sense of purpose. He asked her to help him start a foundation that would help homeless children and struggling mothers across Nigeria, a foundation that would give people hope the same way Joy had given hope to Grace and David. We'll call it the Grace and Joy Foundation, Samuel said, because both of you taught me the most important lesson in life. Kindness changes everything. 6 months later, Samuel and Grace got married in a beautiful ceremony. It was a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. David was the ring bearer, dressed in a tiny tuxedo, his smile brighter than the sun. After the wedding, Samuel moved his entire family abroad to live with him in London. Grace's health was fully restored. David was enrolled in a top international school where he excelled in every subject. They lived in a beautiful house with a garden, and every night the three of them sat together for dinner, holding hands and thanking God for bringing them back together. But they never forgot Joy. Every month, Samuel sent her updates, photos of David at school, photos of Grace, looking healthy and happy, videos of their new life, and every time Joy received these updates, she cried tears of joy. Joy's life transformed too. Her restaurant business grew into a chain of 3 successful locations across Port Harcourt. She graduated from university with honors. She moved into a beautiful apartment. And she became the director of the Grace and Joy Foundation, traveling across Nigeria to help children just like David. One evening, as Joy sat in her new office, looking at photos from the Foundation's latest outreach program, she smiled to herself. She thought back to that first day when a small, hungry boy sat on the bench outside her small food shop. She thought about how close she came to ignoring him. She thought about how one simple decision, one act of kindness, changed not just his life, but her life too. "Thank you, David," she whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that giving is the greatest gift of all." And somewhere in London, David was sitting at his study desk doing his homework when he looked at a photo on his wall. It was a photo of him and Joy, taken on the day Samuel found them. He touched the photo gently and whispered, "Thank you, Auntie Joy. You saved us." This story teaches us something powerful. One act of kindness, no matter how small, can change someone's entire life. You never know who you're helping. You never know what door you're opening. You never know what miracle you're setting in motion. Joy didn't have much. She was struggling herself, but she gave anyway. She loved anyway. She helped anyway. And in the end, her kindness came back to her 1,000 times over. So, my dear viewers, I want to ask you a question. When last did you show kindness to someone who couldn't pay you back? When last did you give without expecting anything in return? When last did you help someone simply because it was the right thing to do? If you were in Joy's position and saw a hungry child every day, would you have done the same thing? Be honest with yourself. Drop your answer in the comments below. I really want to know what you think. This story reminds us that life can change in an instant. One moment you're struggling, the next moment blessing locates you. One moment you're helping a stranger, the next moment that stranger becomes the key to your breakthrough. Never despise small beginnings, never look down on people who have nothing, and never ever underestimate the power of a kind heart. If this story touched your heart, if it made you cry, if it inspired you, then do me a favor. Subscribe to Folktale by Eli right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so you never miss another powerful story like this. And please, hit the like button and share this video with your friends and family. Let's spread this message of hope and kindness together. Remember, kindness never dies. It might delay, but it always returns. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But one day when you least expect it, the seeds you planted will grow into a harvest you never imagined. Thank you so much for watching. May you be the joy in someone's life today. May you be the Samuel who comes back to make things right. And may you never be too busy, too broke, or too tired to show kindness to someone who needs it. God bless you all. See you in the next story.